This is a selfie of me and St. Augustine. Hi, I'm Dr. Elizabeth Klein. I teach theology here at the Augustine Institute, and this is what Catholics believe about relics. What is a relic? So the word relic just comes from the Latin reliqua, which means something left behind. So a relic can be anything left behind by Christ or any of his saints. So we might think of the English word like remains, which could be their body, but also could be like an object they used. So some famous relics of Christ, for example, are the Shroud of Turin, which is the shroud he was wrapped in before his resurrection, or relics of the cross, things like that. So those are things that are left behind, but most common of the saints especially is a part of their body. So what is a saint, or who is a saint? This is actually a slightly more complicated question than it might seem. So the word saint just is the Latin sanctus, which means holy. So it's just a holy person. And we can talk about holy people in all kinds of different ways. So then you have a whole kind of range of saintliness, from anyone who's baptized up to what Catholics call a canonized saint. So a canonized saint is usually what people think of when they hear the word saint. And what a canonized saint is it's just someone who's been recognized as holy by the church and put on an official list of holy people, a canon. So if you think about the word like the canon of scripture or like the Star Wars canon, it's like the approved official list of something. So a canonized saint is put on an approved official list by the Catholic Church after like an examination of their life and their holiness and all these kinds of things. And being put on such a list means that this person can be publicly venerated. They can be incorporated in Christian worship. They can be set up as a model of someone we should imitate and these kinds of things. So that's kind of like capital ST saint, a canonized saint, but the word has a much broader meaning. If you're more interested in Catholic saints, who are the saints, who are some awesome saints, who are some weird saints or interesting saints, you can check out the Catholic Saints podcast, found wherever you find your podcasts. Where do relics come from? Who is collecting bits of people's bodies and bones? So this was going to vary pretty widely based on the saint and the time period they lived in. But generally speaking, it would be people who are close to the saint. So anyone who's venerated as a canonized saint generally was already considered a holy person in their life. And so when they die, people often anticipate their canonization and will save objects or save their body or disinter their body after they're canonized to save their relics. Nowadays, this is done in generally a very humane way, and people take great care of the bodies, or if someone's anticipated to be holy, they save parts of their body in a way that's a little bit maybe less upsetting than some of the practices in the Middle Ages. I know when St. Andre Bessette died, he was a miracle worker, already considered very, very holy, and they absorbed all his blood when he died so that there were lots of relics without sort of disrupting the integrity of his body. Are there different types of relics? I mean, there are lots of different types of relics, lots of different objects, places, things that are considered relics. The Catholic Church generally divides relics into three classes. So what's called first-class relics are the actual body of a holy person. A second-class relic is an object that holy person used, like a pen or a book or something like that. And a third-class relic is any object that has touched a first-class relic. So all of the examples of the relics beside me are first-class relics, so they're a small part of the saint's body. So for Blessed Carlo Acutis, it's a small lock of his hair that was actually given to the Institute by his mom. And then here we have Francis Xavier, so it's a small piece of his bone. And then for St. Augustine, this is a little bit of his blood that actually a student provided the Institute many years ago. So why do Catholics divide up the body of saints but generally forbid cremation, the spreading of ashes? So when we cremate a body to spread the ashes, generally the kind of sentiment is this body's not important, this person's soul is what's important, and that's sort of passed on, but their body, is irrelevant. It can lay anywhere. It can sort of be spread out. When we spread out the body of a saint, we're actually saying the exact opposite thing, right? This body is so important because it belonged to a holy person that we want more people to have access to this body in order to be able to venerate and love it. So the kind of intentions behind them are exact opposite. Now, of course, there are lots of examples in Christian history of dividing up relics that are like maybe not the greatest. They're sort of an abuse of the practice or be upsetting to us today. So it's not to say there's never been any problems with this, but the general intention is to honor the person's body. So when a saint is canonized, you kind of have special permission to use their body for the purpose of Christian worship and to sort of house them in churches and distribute them amongst the faithful. So if you're interested in other answers to Catholic questions about sort of end-of-life issues, funerals, burial, why Catholics believe what they do about the bodies of the dead, you could also check out Eternal Rest, which is a film series produced by the Augustine Institute. How are relics verified or authenticated? So again, this question would vary pretty wildly based on historical circumstance. Modern relics would have like certificates with the provenance, and they would be pretty easy to trace where they came from. This is true even of relics maybe a couple hundred years old. But ancient relics, I mean, you'd have to do historical research to find out where the relic came from, how long it had been in a particular church, and so on and so forth to determine whether or not you thought the relic was authentic. Do Catholics worship relics? Catholics, like all Christians, worship God alone. However, Catholics consider a relic, especially obviously a first-class relic, is the body of a saint. And so in the Catholic understanding of the human person, people are both body and soul. And when we rise again on the last day, we're going to get our bodies back. So in a real sense, a relic is that person. And so we treat a relic as we would treat that person. So if there's some holy person you love, grandma, right, you might hug them, you might kiss them. If it's, a holy person that you respected or someone in civil society that you respected, you might like salute them or something. And so the acts of veneration that we give to the bodies of the saints are pretty analogous to the way that you would love or venerate a person. When did the veneration of relics become a thing? When did Christians start to venerate relics? So as I mentioned, we already have things that are like relics in the New Testament, such as the napkins and aprons of St. Paul in Acts 19. And so unsurprisingly, the veneration of relics is extremely ancient. So probably the first instance of sort of venerating a saint's like whole body on their feast day comes from the martyrdom of St. Polycarp. This is a 2nd or 3rd century martyrdom story. So in the story, even while Polycarp's alive, they treat him with respect. And then after he dies, they collect his bones and then celebrate the liturgy at his tomb on his birthday into heaven, which is the day he died. So that's still how we do it today, right? The feast day of a saint is generally the day they died. Are relics biblical? Absolutely, relics are biblical. The idea that you should respect or honor the body of a dead holy person is all over the place in Scripture. In terms of sort of relics as a source of God's grace or power, there are a number of concrete examples in Scripture. One is the bones of the prophet Elisha. In 2 Kings, someone falls dead into the grave of Elisha, and by touching their bones, they're brought back to life. And in Acts 19, the aprons and napkins that have touched Paul's flesh affect healings of people who touch them. So yeah, the idea that God works through material things and especially through the bodies of his holy ones, his saints, is certainly in Scripture. Why do some relics cause miracles? Well, God is pretty much in the habit of using the material world to communicate his grace to us. This is very common throughout the Old Testament and the New. I already mentioned a couple examples such as Elisha's bones. But even more generally, Jesus is like spitting on the dirt. He's writing in the sand with his finger. He's smearing mud on people. He's telling people to go to pools. So the idea that particular objects or places could be sort of places of encounter with God's grace is really common. And so the fact that God uses relics, uses saints to communicate his grace is really just a beautiful part of God's desire to incorporate the body and incorporate the people of God into his plan of salvation. So why are relics often housed in fancy cases or elaborate housings, such as we have here? These are called reliquaries. Obviously, part of it's just we want to highlight the beauty of the relic and show that it's something sacred, but also because of the abuses pertaining to relics, like stealing relics, using relics in magical rites, and these kinds of things. The Fourth Lateran Council in 1215 decreed that relics should be housed in sort of cases so that they couldn't be easily bought or sold or stolen and that kind of thing. Can you buy a relic? Can I buy a relic? Yeah, you can. You're not really supposed to. The buying and selling of relics is forbidden by the church. However, this does happen. You can probably go online and find them. Technically speaking, when you buy or sell a relic, you're actually buying or selling the case that it's in, to avoid saying that you're buying or selling a piece of a saint's body. But generally speaking, that would not be an appropriate way to acquire a relic. You would want to be given the relic, or I suppose if you really want to go medieval, you could steal a relic, but not supposed to buy and sell them. Do I have a favorite relic? This one. This is St. Augustine from our chapel, but I do really love this relic. I love that we have St. Augustine. He's my special patron. Another relic I really love of St. Augustine is actually an autograph of St. Augustine. So he signed his name on a certain set of documents that still survive. It's in a museum in Russia, so I haven't been there, but you know. Another really cool relic I love are the remains of St. Peter, which are directly below the altar of St. Peter's. You can go on a tour underneath St. Peter's in the Vatican and see it, and that one's pretty cool. I actually just think relics are awesome, even though I wasn't raised Catholic. I just think they're really cool. If you want to hear me yak even more about saints, you can check out my book, Angels and Saints, Who They Are and Why They Matter. This is part of the Engaging Catholicism series, which, like this video series, just tries to kind of explain basic Catholic teaching and why Catholics believe the things they do. Thank you for watching What Catholics Believe. Now you know what Catholics believe about relics, and maybe you'll want to go venerate something yourself.